Hello, everyone. My name is Manny Kutiel, and this is Manny's Super Civic Cyber Conversations, where we're continuing our goal of civically engaging the public, especially in this time of need. Today, we are joined by the incredible new District Attorney of San Francisco, Chesa Boudin, who's been connected to Mannys for a long time now. And I'm really honored and very, very thankful, Chesa, that you would take time out of your extremely busy schedule to be with us today. So thank you very much for that, and welcome to the digital world right now.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I think one of my very first campaign events was at Mannys, and I wish I could be there in person today, but of course, we're all holed up in our various quarantined worlds, and it's awesome that you're facilitating this kind of online community as effectively, or almost as effectively, as you do in person at Mannys when you're allowed to be open.
Well, thank you very much. It is sad that we're closed, and we had a conversation yesterday with a fellow restaurant owner down on Valencia, and he was actually, I asked him, I wanted him to take me through what opening night was going to feel like for his restaurant, and he actually started crying. This is a grown man, because right now all of our spots are shut down, and they're cold, and they're vacant, and they're boarded up, and it's a really, it's a sad sight, and I pray for a quick end to this and a return to normalcy. So the way this is going to work is we're just going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then if folks have questions for Chesa, you can actually start writing your questions in the Q&A box now. So there's a little Q&A box, but before we do that, if folks want to just raise their hand, there's a little hand raise button. I'd love to see who's here, and if you could just press the raise your hand, we'd love to check out who's here. Awesome, lots of people. We have a ton of people on this call. Thank you so much for everyone who's spending time here. And if you have questions for Chesa, like I said, you can start typing them in. Wow, a ton of people. Chesa, it's almost like you're popular or something. It's almost like people care about who you are. I have to say, first question is you're probably the most famous district attorney right now. How does that feel being kind of celebrity / public servant?
I just focus on getting the work done. I think sometimes the press can be a distraction, and other times it can be critically important to help explain to the public what we're doing, what the challenges are, to help raise awareness, to help raise support for things like expanding funding for our victim services team, expanding Chinese language access for Chinese speaking victims. Those are things that we've been trying to do, and it's really helpful to have press attention about the work and about the initiatives. But at the end of the day, nothing replaces hard work. Nothing replaces getting into the courtroom, seeing what's happening for yourself. And that's how I try to run the office.
What do you think has been the biggest rude awakening for you since becoming DA?
Gosh.
Okay, hold on, pause.
So many choices, man.
What's been the greatest rude awakening? Oh my God, I didn't think it was going to be like this. And also, what's been the most pleasant surprise?
I think the biggest rude awakening, frankly, is just the limitations, bureaucratic and technological. We have really, really serious challenges around basic things that you wouldn't imagine seeing in San Francisco, of all places, in a law enforcement agency. Getting electronic copies of police reports, figuring out how, especially right now in the midst of this pandemic, to provide discovery to defense counsel without having to come face to face with them. Basic things like that are huge challenges.
How are you doing that? How are you actually proceeding with cases in a time where people aren't supposed to gather in person?
It's a real challenge, and a tremendous amount of my time and energy and my leadership team's time and energy in the last several weeks has been spent focusing on trying to make lemonade out of lemons, trying to find silver linings in this crisis. And one of them is that we are now moving towards a digital system. We're using Zoom so that our lawyers can work from home or from the office and not go into the courtroom.
Okay.
And we are in the process of developing more effective electronic mechanisms to share discovery with public defenders and court staff.
Are you seeing more people get arrested and charged with crimes now from before coronavirus hit us, or is it kind of reduced, or what? Have you seen a change in any way?
We've seen a trend down in most categories of crime, which is great. We love to see that. We've seen an uptick in certain categories of crime, which is really distressing.
Like what?
Domestic violence has gone up right now.
Violence?
Yeah, and I'll explain why. So there's a theory that we need more data to bear out. But what I expect we're seeing is really similar to a seasonal crime effect we see in places like Chicago or Philadelphia with really harsh winters, which is in the summer, people come outside, they spend more time on the streets, there's more social gatherings, and there's more crime as a result.
Right.
In the winter, people hunker down at home and there's less street crime, but more domestic violence. We're seeing similar trends right now. And I think it's a result of.
Oh my God, I left the beets in my oven. Hold on 1 second. Ah! Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
I was roasting beets and
Yeah.
left them in the oven.
Sounds yummy.
Okay.
Don't want to burn your beets, but you do want to make sure to cook them enough or they'll be awfully tough.
No, they're cooked fine. I didn't want to burn
Good.
them.
So the thing I was saying is that under these circumstances, with people on home, effectively on home quarantine, many victims who deal with certain levels of emotional or physical abuse in the home space can find safety at school or at work or when their partners are out, during the day. Right now, nobody's leaving the house, and so people are stuck in close proximity. Relationships that were previously abusive are often being exacerbated by the proximity and the lack of safe space and escape spaces. And people who maybe didn't have an abusive relationship previously, but had underlying tensions, those tensions are now in many cases turning into violence as people are stuck at home.
Yeah, man. So how is the department at both the police and the district attorney's office thinking about how to reorient towards more of these kind of inside the house crimes versus outside the house?
Luckily, domestic violence has and continues to be a priority for my office and for the police department. So we have a really robust domestic violence advocate community in San Francisco. We have really good procedures in place already. Not to say there's not room for improvement, but um, my domestic violence victims advocates have been the priority in this period for getting computers so they can work from home, for getting grant resources that we have available to help support victims through this time period. Um, and it's an area that we continue to prosecute and to create space in the courthouse for prosecuting, even in the even in the context of having reduced resources and staffing.
Okay. Do you mind if can I ask you about your parents for a second?
Yeah, you can, sure.
So your father, David, is 75, I think. My
Yeah.
father is 73. So I also have a father in that age bracket. He is in the New York State prison system, as a lot of us know. It's part of your story. But apparently, I read before this that he's one of the oldest people in the New York State prison system. And so I want to ask you how you're feeling about your father and your mother. If you think Governor Cuomo will grant them clemency, if you're worried about their health, and how, and then also if you can kind of take a step back and say, for all the folks who have people in the prison system, what's being done to protect people's parents and folks in vulnerable populations?
I'm definitely worried about my parents' health. I think we all are in this moment. I'm sure you're worried about your father because people in that age category are vulnerable. People in that age range, regardless of their other underlying health conditions, are very vulnerable right now.
Right.
So I'm certainly worried about my parents. My mother, luckily, my biological mother, luckily, is home. Came home from prison. And she's still vulnerable. I'm still worried about her, but she is in New York City, which is a very dangerous place to be right now for someone her age.
Right.
But she's at least at home and able to take precautions and be with family.
Right.
My father, as you said, is in New York State prison. He's been there continuously since 1981. And he is one of the oldest people in New York State prison. He has underlying health conditions, and he's extremely vulnerable. So I don't know what the future holds for him. I'm very worried about it. A prison guard, a correctional officer at his prison, has tested positive for coronavirus.
Damn.
And so I spoke with him last weekend on the phone. He usually calls me once a week.
Mhm.
At that time, he was doing all right. He was still able to get access to the phones. He was still feeling healthy and safe. But we said goodbye knowing that he might not be able to get to the phones this coming weekend.
Are they practicing any kind of social distancing in the New York prison system, or in our prison system for that matter?
It's one of the real challenges. Yeah, it's one of the real challenges about the the jail, prison, immigration detention context is that it's virtually impossible to practice social distancing or good hygiene in that space. The the space is not designed for social distancing. It's designed to house as many people as possible in a small space. And so you have tremendous overcrowding in the California prisons. You have people not just double and sometimes triple bunked, but also in huge dorm rooms with
Right.
large numbers of people sleeping in gymnasiums or on the floors. San Francisco County Jail, it doesn't have the same kind of overcrowding that the California Department of Corrections has, and yet the head of jail medical, Dr. Pratt, sent a public letter to me and other criminal justice leaders in San Francisco earlier this week, demanding that we significantly reduce the jail population in order
Okay.
to avoid catastrophic results.
And I saw that you were doing that. I read that you were, and not just you, but a lot of other district attorneys and folks that are looking into prison and jail systems are being told we need to take people out that don't have to be there. So how do you decide who gets to leave the prison system, and where are these folks going?
Yeah, I was part of a group of
I'm
elected
asking hard
district.
questions, Chesa. I'm asking all the hard questions.
That's good. I keep them coming. I keep them coming. I was part of a group of, I think, 30 or 35 elected district attorneys across the country who signed an open letter um, highlighting.
Oz, who's your favorite district attorney that you've met so far since becoming DA?
There's so many great ones.
Come on, who's
Uh,
your favorite? Who do you love the most?
I don't know. It's hard to pick just one, but if you're going to hold me to it, I'm going to go with Rachel Rollins in Boston, Suffolk County. Yeah, I love Rachel. There's a lot of other great choices, though. I mean, Wesley Bell in St. Louis and Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, and of course, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. I mean, it is a great community of elected district attorneys across the country doing great work.
Okay,
Um, Yeah,
sorry.
to your question. So, yes, so a lot of us recognize the tremendous public safety risk that coronavirus in the context of mass incarceration poses. We recognize the need to urgently decarcerate as a public health tool. And frankly, what I'm trying to do, Manny, is what I think all of us wish the President of the United States were doing right now, which is letting medical professionals guide public policy.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to do. When I hear from medical professionals who run the jail that many people will likely die if we don't significantly decrease the jail population, I take action.
Right.
And that action looks like in the 3 weeks since Mayor London Breed declared a state of emergency in San Francisco, we have reduced the county jail population by more than 20%. I don't know of any other jurisdiction in the country
Wow.
that has been able to reduce the jail population that much that quickly. And we've done it being mindful every step of the way of victims and of public safety. We've done it thinking about ways to be more effective, more streamlined, more efficient in our use of incarceration as a tool and in our use and reliance on other alternatives to incarceration where appropriate.
Okay, I just have a couple more questions, and then folks,
Sure.
friends who are tuning in, if you have questions for our district attorney, for Chesa, go ahead and enter them into the Q&A box. You were recently elected, right? And you recently had your inauguration. It was a big deal. Justice Sotomayor tuned in. It was a moment. And you came in with all these plans and ideas and things you wanted to fight for. And now you are the district attorney of San Francisco in the middle of a global pandemic. And so I guess my question is, what do you see, kind of stepping back a little bit, as your role, almost like philosophically, like where do you feel like your cog is in this wheel of city leadership in a moment of crisis?
It certainly was awfully soon in my administration to have to deal with this level of crisis. I'm still very much in the process of hiring staff, of making personnel changes, of making the kinds of changes that any newly elected executive would need to make to run their agency. So it is early. It's a challenge for all of us to deal with. To answer your question, Manny, my role is what it was before. It's just higher stakes, higher pressure, different operational circumstances. My role is to keep San Francisco safe. My role is to help administer justice and to lead an agency of approximately 300 really hardworking folks who care about victims, who care about public safety. And now we've got to focus much more narrowly on the more serious crimes, on the crimes that have a defendant incarcerated. And we've got to factor in the public health angle to the broader public safety conversation.
Are you seeing an increase in car break-ins?
No, a decrease, a huge decrease. I mean, remember, Manny,
Wow.
well, here's the thing. You got to remember a significant percentage of car break-ins in San Francisco are committed against tourists. against people who come into the city to go
Right.
shopping or to even come in for professional reasons, but who rent a car, who go to Union Square, what have you, go shopping. Um, Hotels are vacant right now.
Right.
The
Right.
airport's basically shut down. So we don't have all those people coming in, leaving valuables in the car. Most San Franciscans
Right.
know not to leave valuables visible in their car.
Or they don't have cars because
Correct.
our city. I read somewhere recently that there's an expectation that 125,000 hotel jobs have been lost in the state of California alone. So I want to ask you, as from like person to person, friend to friend, because I've gotten to know you a lot over the last year or so. How are you? Like, how's your heart right now, and how are you holding all of this?
It's a stressful time, Manny, but I think it's these kinds of situations that both create opportunities for needed structural change, um, and also create opportunities to test ourselves and our agencies and see if we can rise to the challenge. I'm someone who loves a steep learning curve. I'm someone who loves to work hard and find ways to be more efficient, and to do more with less. And that's exactly what we're forced to do in this situation. So it's stressful, it's anxiety inducing, and it's exactly the kind of environment in which I love to try to thrive.
I know you have a wife, but I feel like if you didn't, and you had a dating profile, that would be a great thing to put on it. I love a steep learning curve. Just, just for another life. I'm just gonna put.
I'll pass it on to my wife.
Okay. All right, we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna pause on our conversation and just try to get to some of these because there are a lot of folks that have questions. So the first one I'm looking at is from Josh, and it's about how COVID is affecting due process. So the speed of people getting charged, getting a trial, and how
Yeah.
do you feel about the DOJ asking for exceptional powers to hold people without trial during and after the crisis? I imagine you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, it's something we're dealing with. And look, we're trying to do justice. We're trying to hold people accountable when they've caused harm, and we're trying to not violate the law ourselves. We want to respect and uphold defendants' constitutional rights the same way that we uphold all other laws that we enforce. And we did receive an order from the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court earlier this week, effectively suspending all jury trials and continuing them for 60 days. Now, ordinarily, I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds here, Manny. It sounds like the person, I think it was Josh who asked the question, is interested in
Josh, yes, and he's a.
Josh, yeah, is interested in sort of the technical nitty gritty. I'm going to ask other viewers to kind of bear with us here as we get a little bit technical and in the weeds. But ordinarily, under California law, a defendant charged with a felony can assert their right to speedy trial
Mhm.
and appear in front of a jury within 60 days.
Okay.
The Chief Justice just issued an order continuing or postponing by 60 days any speedy trial right. And if this crisis continues, we expect that order may be followed by another similar order, further delaying.
Okay.
What that means is, if let's just say hypothetically that you are in jail and you were wrongfully accused of a crime and you want to have your day in front of a jury,
Right.
you can't do it right now. There's no way to do it right now.
Right. Because
Ordinarily,
gathering or.
well, yeah, because we're not calling juries in. We can't have that many people in a room. We're not going to put victims and witnesses at risk by bringing them into a courthouse full of people to testify.
Right.
We're not going to put our lawyers at risk by having them in that space.
What's happening?
So what's happening right now is all across the state, there are basically no jury trials being conducted. There are basically no preliminary hearings being conducted.
Okay.
And yet people are being arrested and being charged. And so we need to have some mechanism for resolving cases, for getting people out of custody, for not violating their rights. What that looks like really depends on the case. In many cases, we are finding ways to negotiate resolutions to cases that involve much longer terms of home detention than we would otherwise have imposed. We're using home detention and electronic monitoring in lieu of jail and prison in some cases. In other cases, we're finding ways to expedite the release of people from jail who arguably never should have been there in the first place. Just this morning, I was working on getting a woman out of custody who was in San Francisco County Jail. She's got a high-risk pregnancy,
Right.
and she's charged with a misdemeanor. So
Right.
question whether that's a good use of our jail. Do we
Right.
want a woman with no criminal record
Right.
who's pregnant, high-risk pregnancy, misdemeanor charges? Do we want them in jail? Or is there another alternative that can allow us to hold that person accountable while respecting their dignity and humanity and the future life that they're carrying within their belly?
Okay. So, question for Mark Limpkin, which I think it's fascinating. If it was possible to reduce the jail population by 20% in response to the crisis, Why is it not possible or not done earlier? And also, what are the long-term implications does this have now for how we incarcerate? And I'll just pause that and say, we talked to Jeff Kaczynski yesterday or the day before, who's managing the city's response to folks who are unhoused, right? And the city is preparing to, and very might well, house 8 to 10,000 people. And the same question came up. If the city can do this now, maybe this is a roadmap for how we can do some of these things in the longer term. So how does this apply to criminal justice?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the silver linings is that it is forcing all of us in the criminal justice space to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, how do we use jails? How do we use criminal charging? And is it sustainable in the long term? I think, we knew, and I ran on a platform, as you remember, to end mass incarceration. So we knew that mass incarceration was a problem. I think the COVID-19 epidemic is showing us in much more detail the ways in which mass incarceration presents a tremendous public safety and public health risk to all of us. So I think that's right. I think the question is right. We need to find ways to safely sustain some of the decreases um, in the jail population and in the broader criminal justice system. It's not going to be easy in certain categories. In other categories, it will be easy. I think we've come up with workarounds that are legal and bureaucratic pathways that we can continue to use after this crisis is over.
Got it. There were two questions about how things are being prosecuted now. One is from Josh, which is whether or not y'all are prosecuting charges related to COVID, like social distancing and stuff. I heard of some people who were playing beer pong in the Panhandle, and the police gave them the ticket. And so, a question about which I know isn't being arrested, but are you guys prosecuting stuff related to COVID and social distancing? And then there was a question on whether or not you got the DA's office is criminalizing homelessness right now, taking people's belongings, tents, that kind of thing, like certain rules that are being broken by people who are homeless.
So great questions. First of all, we have not yet filed any criminal charges for violations of the social distancing quarantine orders. There is a state law that allows us to prosecute as a misdemeanor violations of that public health order. We hope not to have to ever file charges, and we are working with the police department closely to come up with a protocol for providing warnings and de-escalation in those situations. And we are primarily interested in enforcing willful repeated violations. This is about public health and public safety. It's not about securing criminal convictions.
But it's good to know that you guys haven't even had to get to that place yet, that people are generally following the rules.
Yes, so far we're doing well. And I think as more cases of COVID-19 emerge in San Francisco, we will have to be more aggressive in our enforcement of the quarantine.
Right. And folks are tuning in. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if you have a question for the District Attorney of San Francisco, Mr. Chesa Boudin, now's the time to write them in. Doris has a question, which is, how is the DA's office helping individuals released from prison or jail get connected to housing? We were in a crisis before this, and now things are getting even tougher, I'm sure.
Correct. So a lot of issues there. Most homeless shelters are closing their doors. They're not accepting new people. It is creating challenges for us. It really does depend on the facts and circumstances of the individual. But we are taking our lead, as I wish the President of the United States would, from the medical professionals. We are working closely with the jail medical and jail reentry team to identify individuals who are particularly vulnerable in jail, individuals who have a need to be somewhere other than jail to get medical treatment, and to help find good transitions for those individuals. So for example, with the woman I mentioned earlier who is pregnant, the jail medical team came to me and said, this woman is pregnant, it's high risk. I looked up the case, I said, it's only a misdemeanor, there's no criminal history, there's no act of violence or harm to a person, it's a property crime. And then I said to the jail reentry team, okay, I agree we should get this person out of jail, but what's the plan? And they came back to me and said, well, we've got a doctor waiting at SF General, we've got medications that we can issue to them before they're discharged, and then we've got a place that they can go that will provide them with both supervision and prenatal care for the duration of the pregnancy. That's our model approach to getting people out of jail. Work in partnership with the public defender, with the jail reentry and Department of Public Health team, and make sure we have a good transition plan. Doesn't happen in every case, but we try to do that in every case.
Okay. There were a couple questions just about how the average person can get involved right now. Obviously, criminal justice reform is an issue that needs a lot of people, especially folks who are, outside the system, to advocate. for, and right now there's a lot of focus on it. And so there's a question about how can the average person uh, advocate for diminishing prison populations given the obvious health issues. That's from someone who's anonymous. There's a question about how the average person can help with curbing ICE right now, and also just decarceration in general. So if you're a San Franciscan, you're sitting in your apartment, you want to be helpful, you want to help your efforts, how can you get involved right now to be of service?
So I think there's a lot that we can do from home. I'm doing a lot from home myself right now.
Kind of mean jazzercise exercise routine.
I want you to send me the link afterwards. Definitely.
Workout playlist. It's amazing.
Awesome. We all need new ways to stay fit at home. So I'm in the process of working on an open letter to Governor Newsom that I'm hoping to co-sign with Public Defender Mano Raju here in San Francisco about ways that the governor can help reduce the prison population. And yesterday I was part of a virtual Zoom press conference urging the governor to take action around reducing the immigration detention population in California. I think there's a lot of public conversations that are being had about these issues. And it's critical that elected officials know that there is community support for reducing the jail and prison and immigration detention populations right now. Make your voice heard, get on social media, raise awareness, message your governor, message your elected officials. There's some really interesting polling that shows across the country, even people who identify as extremely conservative, in significant majorities support reducing overcrowding in detention centers right now. So this is a popular issue, and we just need to make sure that elected officials know that. And let me explain sort of briefly why it's so important that they hear from you as their constituents right now. It is a scary thing as an elected official, as a district attorney, as a governor, to make a decision that someone should be released from custody. If you make that decision and that person ends up getting hurt or causing harm to someone else, then people will point directly back at you and say, if you had not let this person out early, then this crime would not have occurred. It's very important, if we're going to take that risk, that all of the listeners here who care about these issues also help us get the message out about the lives we're saving, about the harm we're reducing, about the families we're reunifying. The fact that one person gets hurt is always a tragedy. It's always something we strive to avoid. But we also need to remember the bigger picture context, and we need to take decisive, bold action in order to minimize the harm that mass incarceration causes. In this moment, more than ever, we are hearing loud and clear from medical professionals that having large numbers of people in cages is a very serious public safety risk. We need people to share and amplifying that message.
Well, I think that's actually a great note to end on, Chesa. For everyone who's tuned in, please check your chat box. And in your chat box, there's a link, and it's joinit.org/o/Mannys. That is the link to support my small business, Mannys, which is closed right now because of the requirements for small businesses to shut down. Please consider becoming a sponsor. It's $36 a month. We really appreciate it. Chesa, is there any final word that you'd like to say to the folks who are tuning in?
Please stay healthy. Please stay strong. We're going to get through this together, and we're going to be better off for it. I love you, San Francisco. I miss you, and I can't wait to all be back out on the streets enjoying our beautiful city.
Thank you so much, Chesa. Please tag at Welcome to Mannys if you want to post about today's conversation. And thank you, Sam, Jupiter, and Ram for making this happen. Chesa, keep fighting the good fight. I wish I could give you a hug right now, but I can't. I'm so glad you're working outside of the Hall of Justice in the sunshine. That's amazing. You're so committed to the Hall of Justice, working outside there all the time. I'll let you know how the beats turned out, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you. Have a good day.